Hello, this is Faith at Faith and Books, and I am doing my next installment of the Earth User's Guide to Permaculture. And I'm going to review Chapter 8, our plant and seed heritage, and then Chapter 9, which is a new section of the book about applying permaculture principles to your own property. So, our plant and seed heritage, this is exciting to me because I've lately gotten into gardening and I've learned all about heirloom plants and the problems that we're having in the industrial farming, global empire of people like Monsanto, where they're actually, they own the seeds. It's not copyright. What's the other thing? They have a patent on these seeds that have to be used. This is why GMOs are bad, that have to be used with certain fertilizers and other chemical things, and so they, like insecticides, and so they own the patent, so that the farmer can't save the seed and replant. They have to buy it again, and they have to buy a whole package of the right herbicides and insecticides and fertilizers to go with it. And it's kind of scary to think that this big global faceless corporation is controlling our major food sources. That's a scary thought. I really love that there's this sort of, along with the farmers market and people saying buy local and all that sort of, from the ground, grassroots kind of rebellion against the globalization and the industrialization of food. Along with that are these sort of rebels who have kept up saving seeds, and they actually, it's like a hobby where they would save these heirloom seeds. And I just started learning about that in the last couple of years. And there's some good companies out there that are really, smaller companies that are trying to save these seeds, and they're bringing back, like, some of these foods are on the verge of extinction. Like, we're eating less and less variety, even though we're supposed to eat a lot of variety, right? But we're actually eating less and less, and they'll just say they'll grow a tomato that travels well and looks pretty, but it's not nutritionally dense. It's not, I don't know, it doesn't have like maybe the variation in flavors, and it's not as richly flavored. And but because it can ship well and it looks pretty, that's what the supermarket gets flooded with. So now you have this whole heirloom seed movement, and I just love it. I've been I just bought seeds from Baker's Creek, which is probably the most well-known company that's been doing that. Maybe it's been doing it the longest. But the one that they're in Missouri, but there's one in Mineral, Virginia, my state, called Southern Exchange Seed Savers or something like that. And I buy most of my stuff from them. Then I did just buy from Johnny Seeds, which I think is in upstate New York. But they are 3 smaller seed companies that are really invested in preserving these heirloom seeds and reviving variety in our vegetables and fruit by bringing back some of these almost forgotten varieties of vegetables and fruits. So to me, that's exciting. I don't know why. I just I don't know why I love that so much, but I do. So our plant and seed heritage was an interesting chapter to me. Let's see. Let me just read some of the stuff that I underlined for a couple minutes, and then I'll go on to the next thing. Every country is rich in plants exquisitely adapted to its soils, climate, and landforms. This rich and precious natural vegetation cares for soil, water, and animal species in ways that we barely understand. Plants, their yields, and uses are a fundamental theme that runs through all permaculture practices. Now let's see. In many places in the world, both indigenous and introduced plants are threatened with local extinction. These plants are morally the public property of all the people who live in that bioregion. right? So it's not right for Monsanto to get rid of whatever it is that, grows really well in my region, but they're going to patent the seed and make it so you can't plant without buying from them. It's not right. So our ethical task is to preserve and propagate all local and traditional introduced species and to save and grow their seed, to start local seed banks and contribute to existing ones. And I actually, two things that I bought from my local CSA or community supported agriculture. I can walk to them. They're that close. They're about 15-minute walk. And I got cantaloupes from them, and I got red bell peppers, and I saved those seeds. So they're drying. I have to go put them in envelopes and label them, which I haven't done yet. But so I decided I'm going to try and save seeds and try to plant them. See if I can remember to do this in the spring. But I'm going to experiment and see if it works. So, all right, let's see. And then it says our design aims for plants and seeds are to know where to place them in a permaculture design, to deduce how climate and microclimate will affect them, describe their functions and products, grow non-hybrid species by simple propagation techniques, select, dry, store, and grow our own seeds. So in permaculture, and I knew about this from the gardener who put in our garden, every plant must carry out 2 or more functions. So for him, he said it's either got to be a pollinator, it's got to be a nitrogen fixer, putting nitrogen into the soil, or it's got to grow food for us. So that was those were his priorities for what to plant in our garden. And I had heard that before. And she lists a whole different, it's more than just those 3 that I mentioned. Pest resistance, nitrogen supply, a nutrient cycling, and so that's sort of comfrey. That's why he planted comfrey. I think comfrey does both. It's a nitrogen fixer, but also you chop it, and when it breaks down, it recycles that nutrient into the soil. It makes good compost. Fire resistance, not in my area, but I guess in other places. Efficient water usage, carbon sink, glare reduction, mulch, and that again is also comfrey. I don't know what's the difference between nutrient cycling and mulch. Temperature modification, drought survival, soil improvement, windbreak, variety of yields, soil protection, shade, flood resistance, and habitat. So those are various purposes that a plant can have, and you want to have at least 2. When you decide to plant it. If you plant a wide diversity, some plants will survive. So she's saying plant wide diversity because you have better chances of success. For example, if you plant 4 or 5 varieties of onions, you will achieve continuous yields and also ensure that at least some will survive a disease, epidemic, or other environmental disaster. Let's see. What else? I don't want to go too long here. Here she just mentioned, this made me think of, he planted pineapple guava. He recommended that in one area of our yard, which is the south-facing wall. And she mentions that. However, you can have success if you plant them in special microclimates, such as next to a western wall, this is the southwest wall, with some air circulation. Let's see, so I went through the major food plant groups. I went through and circled all the ones that we have in our garden. And I just learned about the legume family. The legume family, they live in symbiosis with nitrogen-fixing bacteria in their roots. I just learned about that. I'm gonna grow. I bought several different types of beans, at least 2 different types of bean seeds, and I'm going to try and plant some in the spring. And also the cereal family, just because that's a staple. Everywhere in the world, humankind has some sort of a cereal staple, whether it's, rice or wheat or rye or barley or potatoes or something. Are potatoes considered a cereal? But, like Native Americans and corn, that sort of thing. So every culture has some sort of a cereal staple. And so for that reason, they get included as one of the basic crops to grow. And then she talks about ways to propagate plants. She goes into that. Let's see. Goes into problems with international seed from these global corporations and why they're so bad for the earth and for humankind. She goes into how to choose, like the heirlooms, like I was talking about before. Then she goes into how to collect different types of seeds, how to treat them so that they won't get moldy and that sort of thing, which I did not follow any of this. I just got them out and I sort of knew, I rinsed them and then I sort of knew that you should just at least dry them. So I dried them on paper and they look fine. There's no mold or anything. Anyway, so that was interesting. Then on to applying permaculture. See, your final plan, oh, I locked the door. No, I'm busy. I can't help right now.
I need to get something.
Can you just wait 2 minutes? Wait 2 minutes, okay? All right. Okay, so your final plan will show you the zones appropriate to your site, and these will form a natural integrated design that can be tested against the ethics and principles of permaculture. So this is applying permaculture. So chapter 9 is something that I'm not going to do right now. It's very involved, very intensive, and basically you observe every detail, as much detail as possible about your land and climate and every circumstance, every different factor. And so she goes into how you should do this, and you just have to keep really, really detailed records. And I know I'm not going to do that right now. So, but she talks about how, forethought and really examining everything closely, you'll make wiser decisions. You'll be more informed. You'll be less likely to make mistakes. And let's see, techniques and strategies for reading that. I thought this was a beautiful statement. Observation is a skill that grows and grows. Eventually, you will feel that if you were confined to a small garden for the rest of your life, you could never know everything, nor ever be bored. So it just gets deeper and deeper the more you observe. I'm getting better at observing, not very good at all yet. But the thing is, I just have so many distracting things going on in my life, like the guy who wants to come in right now, that I just can't focus the way I'd like to in order to really get good at this. So the strategy is walk around your land frequently at different times of the day, in different seasons. Targeted observation. She talks about an example of this is weed encroachment, which is something I have a terrible problem with. I want to get ahead of the weeds somehow, or at least really, really make a concerted effort to get ahead of the weeds this spring. So I'm really going to look into that, how to handle that in a, environmentally friendly way. Let's see. Anyway, you look at other landscapes that are similar to yours and see how they've dealt with things, like what kind of windbreak they put up or that sort of thing. You learn to read patterns. You analyze everything so you can figure out what you need. It says what are its yields and what are its needs. So she gives an example for chickens. You will design grains, greens, and medicines to grow where the chickens run. I never even thought about that. I think it keeps dimming and then getting lighter on the camera. I'm sorry if I keep going in and out. But I have chickens now, and I could do that. I could plant things that are good for chickens to eat. I hadn't even thought of that. Mapping, big into mapping. Off-site information, do a lot of research on your land, what was grown before, what happened in the past. Study the climate, gather data for that. Study the water, the history of water, how water is dealt with in your area. Just go into every single detail. She's got this design there. And then you put it all together. So the next thing is developing your design methods. So I'm going to read that, and then, since I'm running out of time, I'm going to start focusing on the different zones. So in permaculture, they divide everything into zones, and each zone has its own priorities and the techniques developed for that zone and considerations for that zone. The first zone is, and this is what I love about permaculture, because humans are integrated into the whole thing. It's how we live. Zone 0 is your house. How are you living in your house? How can you benefit the environment? And that sort of thing. So the zones I'm most interested in are zone 0 and zone 1, which is the garden. And then the food forest, I mean, that's part of my garden. I have a little bit of a food forest, and I have a little bit of patch of trees that I'd like to take care of. There's lots of invasive species there that I'd like to replant with natives and that sort of thing. The birds and the bees in the food forest, that's going to be somewhat interesting. And then if you're farming zone 3, so I'm not farming really, and zone 4 goes out to like timber and stuff like that, having forests for timber and wood, and the natural conservation forests. So we'll see. I think I'm going to focus mostly on the ones, since I'm running out of time in November, I'm going to focus on the ones that are most relevant to me, and then maybe I'm just going to sort of do a cursory read of the other stuff that doesn't quite apply. So anyway, that is it for permaculture, and I've got to go now, and I hope you're doing well, and happy reading. Bye.